اشتدت القبيات في شمال لبنان. أرحب بكم مشاهدينا الكرام في
Welcome, dear viewers, coming to you from the village of Al-Qubayyat in northern Lebanon. We came to this village to interview and meet with the great fighter, Mr. Georges Abdallah, who spent 41 years behind the bars in French jails. Who is this fighter? Let's watch this report and then we will return to meet Mr. Georges Abdallah.
هذا التقرير ونعود لنلتقي بالأستاذ جورج عبد الله.
41 عاما من الأسر.
41 years of captivity, and his only crime was resistance. The Lebanese fighter Georges Ibrahim Abdallah has finally returned to his homeland after spending more than 4 decades in French jails on politically motivated charges. Abdallah was born to a Maronite Christian family in Al-Qubayyat in 1951. From a young age, he chose to become a voice for the oppressed people, supporting Arab nationalist causes and standing by Palestine, not just with words, but with actions. He joined the ranks of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and confronted the Israeli occupation of Lebanon in 1982. He later became one of the founders of the Lebanese Armed Revolutionary Factions, raising the slogan of resistance to imperialism and occupation. In 1984, French authorities detained him under ambiguous circumstances and accused him of complicity in operations conducted in support of Palestine. In 1987, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. At that time, he stated, "I am a fighter and not a criminal, and my path was imposed on me by human rights abuses in Palestine." Although he had fulfilled the conditions for his release since 1999, France refused to release him under American and Israeli pressure. Georges Abdallah was asked to publicly apologize and admit his mistake and say that what he committed was a crime. But his legendary answer to that was, "I will not regret, I will not compromise, and I will continue to resist." These years were marked by solidarity, appeals, and sit-ins in front of the French embassies, which were met with continued rejection from a state claimed to be democratic, while sending a fighter behind bars simply for resisting.
أرحب بكم مجددا مشاهدينا الكرام في هذه الحلقة من برنامج ضيف وحوار.
Welcome again, dear viewers, to this episode of the program Guest and Dialogue, in which we meet the great fighter, Mr. Georges Abdallah, after his return to Lebanon following 41 years of detention in French jails. Welcome, Mr. Georges.
Thank you.
All of Lebanon and the entire Arab world have welcomed you after this long absence. Despite this absence, your path of resistance continued. We will discuss all of that, but first I would like to ask you about your first impression when you set your foot on Lebanese soil.
I felt the nation's warmth and recognized that our nation is resilient, deserves freedom, and has all the means to defend it. Before leaving the plane, the Lebanese people on board approached me and expressed their warm feelings upon learning of my presence. That was a source of warmth and reassurance.
What about the crowds who gathered to welcome the fighter Georges Abdallah?
At the beginning, I saw the security forces and their faces were bright. They radiated a lot of love. Upon reaching the airport hall, I found all the active political forces in Lebanon expressing the essence of their struggle. I felt relieved because I found that our current forces are capable of confronting and overcoming the process of Somalization that the imperialist powers are pushing for, and which aims to turn the entire Arab Levant to conflicting hotspots, with Israel overseeing its extermination.
Mr. Georges, when you learned that your release would become a reality and that you would return to Lebanon, what was your biggest concern regarding Lebanon, especially as you came back during very worrying circumstances, as Lebanon has been going through sensitive circumstances after a destructive war and the loss of many resistance leaders?
الشيء الأكبر الذي حملته في وجدانك قلقا على لبنان.
فقدان الشهداء هو له وجهان في الواقع.
The loss of martyrs has two aspects, a very painful one due to the loss of historical leaders and a hopeful one because when the leadership of a popular movement faces martyrdom, it signifies that the movement can't be defeated. Typically, leaders who hold revolutionary values remain committed to their positions, regardless of the risks. But when leaders are hypocrites, they flee. In fact, when we find the best leaders beneath the ground, we become assured that victory is inevitably coming.
So this has assured you and hasn't frightened you?
This absolutely hasn't frightened me. I saw the companions of these leaders at the forefront of those welcoming me, and this gave me reassurance. When the companions of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah were at the forefront, standing shoulder to shoulder with their allies from other parties, it signifies that the Somalization process would inevitably fail.
Were you following the news about Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah?
I was closely following the development in Lebanon through all possible means.
Then you followed the news of the martyred leader. How did you receive the news of his martyrdom?
It was shocking news. Frankly, I didn't expect them to be able to find him.
You didn't expect them to find him?
Yes, I didn't expect they would manage to find him. I thought they would try as they did before, but I didn't expect them to succeed.
And after you learned about it?
It was a disaster because it was a great loss. It was also a source of pride and honor that he was at the forefront.
If Nasrallah were in front of you now, what would you say to him?
I would say I salute you as a leader of the revolution and resistance. I salute him with respect and appreciation, whether he is alive or martyred.
Do you think he did what he had to do regarding the Palestinian cause?
We had hoped that circumstances would allow him to live a long life. Circumstances dictate, but he was in a leading position and fell while striving to liberate Palestine.
Regarding your 41 years of imprisonment, your life sentence was supposed to expire in 1999. Why weren't you released when your sentence ended?
تحرير المناضلين لا يتم بناء أو استنادا للسنوات التي يقضونها.
Actually, the release of resistance fighters doesn't hinge on their sentence. Throughout its history, France has never released an Arab fighter without a swap. No one, whether a fighter, politician, or military person, has ever been released without an exchange, where they give a prisoner in return for another.
تأخذون أسيرا نأخذ بأسير.
This means the right system in France.
That's all propaganda.
مسألة ثانية يعني كيف تنشر وتعطي
France is the mother of freedoms and a state of law. Haven't you feel that way?
أنت تقولين ذلك.
What you are saying is the French propaganda. It claims that France is the mother of human rights and the mother of separation of the judicial power from the political and military powers, etc.
هذه حقوق لكل دولة.
So what's the reality?
ولا علاقة لهذا الموضوع. المناضل العربي في السجون الأوروبية والمناضل المشرقي في السجون الأوروبية ليس فقط في فرنسا.
The reality has nothing to do with that. The Arab fighter in European prisons or the Eastern fighter in European prisons, not just in France, is released when their continued detention becomes more costly than their release. When France felt that releasing Georges Abdallah was the best way to ease the pro-Palestine action, it decided to release him. Expressing solidarity with the fighter, whether in France or elsewhere, doesn't succeed by keeping it in the fridge, but when their companions and supporters outside succeed in expressing solidarity with them as part of their struggle against the imperialist powers. For example, when a protester demanding the release of Georges Abdallah considers this demand a prelude to condemning the genocidal war or the brutal wars on Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, etc.
مدخلا لإدانة حرب الغاشمة على لبنان على إيران على العراق على
So the reason was that the demand for the release of Georges Abdallah became an integral part of each action supporting Palestine.
مع فلسطين هذا هو السبب.
هذا ليس ما أقوله أنا هذا ما يقوله القرار القضائي.
That was the main reason. That's not just my words, but what the judicial decision stated. The ruling that was issued had justifications. The first justification was that Georges Abdallah's presence in the prison was a reason behind nationwide unrest, and his release poses less danger than keeping him incarcerated. This was the first reason, which undermines all claims of freedom and the separation of powers in France, as my presence in the jail hinged on the signature of a minister and not...
It was a political decision and not a judicial one?
It was a political decision.
Mr. Georges, have you ever been offered deals?
I can't be offered deals. My initial stances have showed that. At the start of my detention, I refused to engage in any judicial discussion, as I did not plead to defend myself at any stage. I just defended the legitimacy.
You were told to express regret to be released.
I can't regret. I was jailed because I considered the actions of the revolutionary forces in France to be legitimate and believed that we should trample on any law that contradicts that. That was my stance in front of the judiciary.
This stance
was the main reason.
This stance was the reason for the renewal of your sentence in 1999.
When I appeared in court, the prosecutor did not ask for a life sentence. Usually, the prosecutor asked for the highest possible sentence, but he requested less than 9 years.
That's why the prosecutor typically asks for the maximum sentence.
The prosecutor usually asks for the maximum sentence, but there were no material convictions against me. There was just my principled position, which is what happened in Palestine and in Lebanon, what happened in Sabra and Shatila, the occupation and the killing of 30,000 in the 1982 aggression have turned all the imperialist targets into legitimate targets, wherever they are. When your soldiers, the supporters of Petain and the supporters of de Gaulle fought in Lebanon, they were still on your land. If you have the rights to fight in defense of your country on our territories, then we should fight on your land in defense of ourselves against you.
You said, I will not regret, I will not compromise, and I will continue to resist.
And that's exactly what I did.
That's what you did, and it resulted in the renewal of your sentence.
That's what allowed me to act like a struggler, just like any other struggler. It was not a heroic act.
Haven't you regretted losing 41 years of your life?
No, I spent 41 years as a struggler. This was the sentence of a struggler. The struggler fights, whether in captivity or outside of it. As a struggler in captivity, I fought within specific circumstances. Fortunately, I was surrounded by other activists who helped position my struggle and steadfastness as part of the resistance process. I sincerely hope that our Palestinian companions receive even a fraction of the solidarity I received. What revolutionaries experience in Israeli jails today is indescribable.
That aligns with the Arab nations and the resistance.
That aligns with the nations and strugglers.
Your acts of resistance began before 1984 when you were detained, and you mentioned they will continue after your release. What are the upcoming steps?
Of course, the next steps depend on the development of the ongoing battle. I believe that the greatest danger posed to the Palestinians, Lebanese, Arabs, and Muslim nations in the entire region is the Somalization. My position will be determined by the leaders and active forces.
What will you do for Gaza?
I'm not coming in on horseback to be appointed to a leading position somewhere. I am just a fighter awaiting the instructions, orders, and opinions of the existing leaders that oversee the system.
Mr. Georges Abdallah, you were following the developments in Gaza and the war in Lebanon while you were behind the bars. Regarding the genocidal war and the starvation in Gaza, do you think the Arab nations' performance has been up to the mark? And what should they do?
I believe that the performance of Arab and Muslim nations in general, and the Egyptian nation in particular, not only falls short of the mark, but it truly is shameful. Each Arab and Muslim person should recognize that Greta, a 17-year-old girl from Sweden, and Rima Al-Hassan, in her 30s, both boarded a Gaza-bound boat with a few meters of space, each carrying a bottle of milk. In the meantime, people in Gaza, which are meters away from a sea of Arabs and Muslims, are waiting a glass of water. We see on social media platforms and television the skeletal bodies of children who are still alive waiting for a drop of milk. We should ask, where are the Arabs? Where are the Muslims? We should raise this question, where are they? In France, solidarity protests take place in more than one city every day, and the same is true across all of Europe.
في فرنسا في كل يوم في أكثر من مدينة هناك مظاهرات تضامن في أوروبا بكاملها.
ماذا أي رسالة؟
What's your message for the Egyptian people in particular and the Arab nations in general?
مفتاح إنهاء الحرب الإبادة.
The Egyptian people hold the key to ending the genocidal war. There are 104 million people in Egypt, including 80 million Muslims. If just 1 million of them who perform prayers headed towards the border of Gaza, the genocidal war would end. Each Egyptian, each Arab, and each Muslim should look in the mirror and remember the trembling skeletal Gazan people, the protests taking place in Sweden and elsewhere, as well as the supporters who were just meters away in the Mediterranean Sea, and reflect on what they should do. They should remember the trembling skeletal people while they are eating.
ينظروا إلى الأجساد إلى الهياكل العظمية وهي ترجف وهو يأكل.
Then it's everyone's responsibility.
The responsibility lies with the people rather than with the regimes. The regimes are traitorous. There is no room for debate on that. They are traitorous regimes. It is not a matter of regimes, but a matter of peoples. The peoples have power, and they should bear the responsibility to preserve some of their dignity and beliefs.
أستاذ جورج، في لبنان الوضع معقد جدا بالغ التعقيد.
Mr. Georges, the situation in Lebanon is very complicated amid calls for Hezbollah's disarmament, especially after the latest war where Israel managed to deal a painful blow to the resistance. Do you think it's time for the Lebanese army to take over the resistance weapons for us to be safe from the Israeli threats?
يعني نكون بمنأى من الخطر الإسرائيلي.
الخطر الإسرائيلي خطر وجودي.
The Israeli threat is an existential threat. This is indisputable. The existential threat is confronted by existential forces. Lebanon is on the front line, and what honors Lebanon is that it has a resistance founded in the name of Lebanon's people, Palestine, the entire Arab nation, and the entire Muslim world, and it had stood in an advanced position and sacrificed its best members and leaders as martyrs.
خيرة قادتها.
Then you are not against the pro-Gaza operations that were criticized by many Lebanese people.
I am not talking about the pro-Gaza operations, as I may consider them inadequate and believe they should have been more than that. I am not discussing details. I say that the resistance in Lebanon is a symbol of dignity for the country. We all aspire to have an army that protects us. I am neither a weapon enthusiast nor an enthusiast of militias or parallel groups. We all aspire to a state whose leaders possess dignity and ensures the existence of an army equipped with weapons to confront the American aggression throughout Lebanon.
What prevents that?
Leaders of the political body of all stripes say, our friends in the US, our friends in France, our friends in London, and our friends in those countries manufacture weapons. So our question for those powers is, why is our army disarmed? Our army, like all national armies, has a mission to protect the homeland and protect the dignity of the people by safeguarding their homeland and its borders. We are not looking for anything else. Our soldiers and sergeants are honorable people. Our officers are also brave and honorable. They just need to be provided with the necessary weapons. It is not the soldiers and the officers' job to seek out weapons. It's the job of the political leadership to shoulder its duty by providing them with the necessary tools for combat and to bear the responsibility for the army so that our army remains operational, supported by our people and their resistance.
Western powers say the resistance should hand over its weapons.
Western powers are essentially saying you are not allowed to have weapons. This is the stance of all the Western countries, and anyone who claims otherwise is either lying or being hypocritical. The US has stated, you, as Lebanese, do not have the right to maintain an army with capabilities comparable to other armies because you pose a threat to the aggression. When the Lebanese army discovered a weapon warehouse, they were warned against using those weapons and were asked to destroy the warehouse, as it was deemed a threat to Israel. They didn't offer to provide our army with weapons to confront Israel. Instead, they said, your mission is to play the role of police and identify the enemies of Israel until we come to kill them. That's what the West has said.
So the West wants the Lebanese army to act as a policeman for Israel.
Less than a policeman, they showed disdain for the army. When the Lebanese army found weapons and expressed its intentions to use them, the West not only refused but also insisted that the army destroy them. They even asked to document that as a clearance from obligation. There is no greater insult. Sovereignty can only be maintained by the army, and we want our army to be the protector of our homeland.
That is the West's stance. So what does Georges Abdallah think about the resistance weapons and their leaders who are under pressure to hand over their weapons?
These pressures are secondary in importance, and we don't want to discuss those details. The West's stance is that we can destroy you and there is no benefit to the resistance. But there is a nation who is determined to fight in defiance of all powers. Some people tell us that they will exterminate us if we dare to resist. But we are confident that all their efforts will fail. They tell the leaders who hold the powers of political decision-making, we appointed you to this position to carry out this mission. But we say to them, we have soldiers and officers and will do the impossible to ensure they can do their job. We will do the impossible, whether we are resistance fighters or not. The resistance movement is not the only active force in Lebanon. All the active forces in Lebanon seek an army that protects the dignity of the homeland by expelling Israel from our borders and preventing it from violating our sovereignty in any form. We will not allow the process of Somalization in the Arab Levant in any form.
بأي شكل من الأشكال صوملة المشرق العربي.
They are trying to delegitimate the armed resistance. Are you in favor of its continuation?
المقاومة مستمرة وستستمر إلى الأبد.
The legitimacy is not granted by anyone. The resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere has continued and will last forever. The resistance is not a slogan, but the principle of confronting the occupier. This occupier will be eliminated, whatever they did. Some people prefer to live under the boot of the occupier, and other people refuse to live under the boot of anyone.
But now they say if the resistance weapons are not handed over, Israel will launch a new war to pressure Lebanon.
There is no need for discussing these details. We are a resilient nation and we don't compromise our dignity. They want to strip us from our dignity in order to let us live somehow. We have to mention the true context of their demand that you mentioned. The US wants all of us to surrender and kneel down, or it will kill us.
Mr. George, you left Lebanon in 1984.
From a long time ago.
قبل ذلك ولكن غادرت لبنان عمليا بشكل جسدي.
You left it earlier, but you left Lebanon completely 41 years ago when the circumstances in Lebanon were so harsh after the 1982 Israeli invasion and the ensuing disasters. Now the situation is also difficult. Do you think the resistance and national forces are in a better position than in the 1980s?
المقاومة والقوى الوطنية وضعها أفضل أم في الثمانينات؟
الوضع اليوم هو أفضل بكثير.
The situation now is so much better because the dimensions of the conflict are clearer, thanks to our resistance, which has a great and incomparable legacy. We also have martyred leaders, a sea of blood, and steadfast nations. Of course, the situation is better. We can also see the social bloc interested in change in Lebanon is closer to understanding and cooperation, allowing us to remain united, and only together we can win, regardless of the secondary affiliations. This experience has cost us many martyrs. Now we are more united than ever, and only together we can win. All active forces in Lebanon are required to practically embody this process. It is not a matter of details such as keeping a Kalashnikov rifle here or taking a gun from there. The real question is whether this is a homeland or not. If it is a homeland, how do we build its state?
مسألة تفاصيل بخلي هون كلاشنكوف ولا باخذ من هناك مسدس. المسألة مسألة هذا الوطن هو وطن أم لا؟
Then, do you think the path towards victory that was outlined by Nasrallah will continue?
طبعا خطها السيد نصر الله وسائر المناضلين.
Of course, the path outlined by Nasrallah and other strugglers will continue. In the Arab world, there is ongoing resistance, whether it has failed in some places and succeeded in others. The resistance has shown that after a whole century, the settler colonialism has failed miserably. Settler colonialism is a genocidal war against indigenous peoples. It succeeded in North America in less than a century. The United States was founded on the extermination of about 20 million indigenous people, who were replaced by Europeans from Ireland, France, Germany, and Britain.
طبعا قضي عليهم وأصبحوا الأوروبيون الذين أتوا من إيرلندا وفرنسا وألمانيا وبريطانيا هم السكان.
Mr. Georges Abdallah, what's the situation of the Palestinian cause amid the ongoing atrocities and genocide?
هذا حرب فاشلة تعبر عن الفصل الأخير من تاريخ الاستيطاني المدعوم من الغرب الإمبريالي. إسرائيل ما هي؟
The genocidal war is a failure and represents the last chapter in the history of settler colonialism, which is supported by the Imperial West. Israel is an organic extension of the Imperial West. Today, youth in the Imperial West, despite its imperialism, disavow it. Even Jews in the US say, they are not from us, we are not from them. After a century of declared genocide, the Palestinian people within historical Palestine now outnumber the Jewish settlers. The number of Palestinians has reached approximately 7,372,000, while the number of Israelis has hit about 7,255,000 since the start of the 20th century, as settler colonialism, backed by the British, began at the end of the 19th century. The number of Palestinians outside Palestine is similar. Thus, there are about 15 million Palestinians despite the genocidal war that began a century ago. I reiterate that this genocidal war has failed miserably, and this is the last chapter of this hateful entity.
Welcome home once again, Mr. Georges Abdallah.
Thank you.
نتمنى وبطبيعة الحال سنراك في ساحات النضال.
We hope to see you in the arenas of struggle in the coming days. You have many tasks and responsibilities ahead with your spirit of resistance that we have come to know and that has not aged. Thank you so much for welcoming us into your precious home in Al-Ghubayyat in northern Lebanon.
في منزلك الغالي هذا في القبيات في شمال لبنان.
Thank you. I also thank your esteemed TV channel. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
مشاهدينا الكرام بهذا نصل.
Dear viewers, we have reached the end of this episode. Thanks for watching and goodbye.